I used to think people only looked that way in films, like they were carrying a secret too heavy for daylight. But the first time I saw her, standing by the half-open window of the old repair shop, wiping her hands on a cloth that had already given up, I knew better. Some people just are secrets. She wasn't supposed to be there that morning. My uncle usually opened the place alone. I'd started helping him over the summer. Oil changes, busted radiators, quiet hours where the radio filled the silence between us. But that day, she was there instead. His cousin, he'd said. Mara. She was older than I expected. Mid-40s, maybe, with the kind of stillness that made noise around her feel rude. The air smelled of metal and heat, and she stood in it like it didn't touch her. I remember thinking that she didn't belong in a place like this. Not because she was too delicate, but because she looked like she could fix more than engines if she wanted to. Your uncle's running late, she said, voice steady low. You must be Aiden. I nodded, awkwardly wiping my palms on my jeans. You've heard of me? Only that you talk too little, she said, and smiled. Not to tease, but as if it was a compliment. That smile stayed with me all morning. She moved around the shop like she'd been there forever, but careful not to touch anything she didn't understand. I caught myself watching her when I should have been working. The way her fingers lingered on the edge of a tool bench, tracing the grooves. The way she hummed under her breath when the radio faded between stations. It wasn't the kind of watching that meant anything yet. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Around noon, the heat thickened. I was changing a tire when she brought me a glass of water, cold, sweating down her wrist. Drink, she said, handing it over. You look like you're melting. I took it, careful not to touch her fingers. I failed. For a second, just a second, my thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. Her skin was cool, almost damp, and I felt her pulse there. A quick, startled rhythm, like mine. She didn't move away. Then she said, softly, You've got grease on your face. I laughed too fast. That's kind of the look here. She reached out before I could finish, wiping a spot from my cheek with her thumb. The gesture was casual, almost maternal, but not quite. Something in her hand lingered longer than it needed to, a hesitation neither of us acknowledged. When she pulled away, she glanced at the window instead of me. Your uncle said you were good with details, she murmured. I see what he meant. I wanted to ask what that meant. I didn't. The day went on, ordinary as ever. We worked in silence, the kind that hums with something waiting underneath. Every now and then, she'd ask for a wrench or pass me a rag, our fingers brushing again and again, each time harder to ignore. When my uncle finally arrived, the spell broke. She wiped her hands, gathered her purse, and gave me one last look, half smile, half question. Don't let him overwork you, she said, voice softer now. You look like someone who forgets to rest. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make her look back. But she was already walking out into the sun, her reflection catching in the shop window, faded, golden, distant. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of what she'd said, but because of the moment before. The touch, the silence, the way the air felt heavier after she left. It wasn't attraction yet. Not exactly. It was the beginning of something I didn't have a name for. And somehow, I knew, whatever it wasn't going to stay unspoken for long. She came back 3 days later. No warning, no reason. Just the sound of the shop door creaking open while I was under a hood, and the faint scent of citrus, and something faintly floral, like she'd walked out of a memory that wasn't mine. Mara, I said before I could stop myself. She looked surprised I remembered her name. You're early, she said, though it didn't make sense. She wasn't my boss, wasn't even part of the shop. Couldn't sleep, I replied, half smiling. Figured I'd get ahead. Good habit, she murmured, then moved toward the counter. Her eyes flicked over the tools, the piles of invoices. Your uncle asked me to help sort through some old records. He's terrible with paperwork. She said it like an apology, like she needed an excuse to be there. I didn't ask for one. The hours stretched slow. She sat at the desk by the window, sunlight cutting across her shoulders, outlining the faint strands of silver in her hair. I worked nearby, pretending to be absorbed in bolts and grease, but I couldn't stop noticing small things, The way she sighed before turning a page, the rhythm of her fingers tapping when she thought no one was looking. At one point, she dropped a folder, papers scattering like startled birds. I bent to help, and our hands collided again. This time, she didn't pull back right away. "Sorry," I said, though neither of us moved. Her voice was soft. "You apologize too much." "I guess I do." "Maybe stop," she said, and smiled, but it was tired around the edges, as if smiling cost her something. When we stood, she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. That's when I noticed the faint tremor in her hand. Barely there, but real. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated, the kind of pause that has too many answers behind it. "I'm fine. Just long week." I wanted to ask more, but she shut it with a change of tone. "You shouldn't look at people so directly, Aiden. It's disarming." I wasn't. I stopped, knowing I was. Her laugh was brief, genuine this time. "You really are terrible at pretending." After that, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was careful, like both of us were afraid of what might happen if it broke. She returned to sorting files, but her movements were slower, her posture different, shoulders slightly curved, like she'd let herself rest for the first time in days. When I left for a moment to grab a part from the back, she was humming again. A low, unsteady tune. When I came back, she wasn't. As the afternoon light dimmed, she stood by the doorway, holding her jacket. "Your uncle will be in tomorrow. You don't need to open early." "I don't mind." "I know," she said quietly. "That's what worries me." Before she left, she touched my arm. Not a full touch, just the brush of her fingers, a moment that might have been accidental if it hadn't lingered a heartbeat too long. "Good night, Aiden." I watched her go, the sound of her heels fading against the concrete. It should have been nothing, but it felt like the beginning of something neither of us had permission to want. The rain came without warning. One of those late summer storms that turn the streets into mirrors and make everything sound closer than it is. I'd stayed late at the shop, finishing an engine rebuild I didn't need to finish tonight. She was there too, as if neither of us wanted to leave first. "Looks like we're stuck," I said, nodding toward the downpour outside. Mara stood by the window, watching the water race down the glass. Her reflection blurred with the streetlights. Two versions of her, one calm, one fading. "I've always liked rain," she said quietly. "It gives you permission to stay still." I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I just watched her, the way her hand rested on the frame, her fingers pale against the dark wood. She looked different in the half-light, softer, maybe lonelier. The clock ticked past 8. The shop smelled like oil and wet air, and the only sound was the rain drumming on the roof. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," I said, "but I think about what I'd be leaving behind more than where I'd go." She turned to look at me then, and whatever she saw made her expression falter for a moment. Something like recognition or regret. "You're too young to talk like that." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe you're too used to hearing it from people who never mean it." That made her smile, a small one that didn't reach her eyes. She stepped closer, just enough that I could see the faint smudge of ink on her thumb, the way her pulse flickered in her throat. "Careful," she said softly. "You sound like you're trying to understand me." "Maybe I am." She didn't move for a long time. The distance between us was measured in inches, in things neither of us said. I could hear the soft rustle of her breath, smell the faint citrus of her perfume. Something about the quiet felt like standing too close to a live wire. Then her phone rang. A sharp, ordinary sound that broke whatever was forming between us. She looked at the screen, her face tightening. "It's sorry. I should take this." She turned away, but her voice carried just enough for me to hear the edge in it. "No, I told you I don't know when I'll be home. It's just work." "No, you don't need to." Her tone shifted mid-sentence, softer now. I said I'm fine. "Please." When she hung up, she stayed facing the wall, shoulders still. The rain filled the silence again. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly. She didn't turn around. Some things never stop asking for your attention, even when they don't deserve it. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to explain. I wanted to close the distance and offer something. Not comfort, just presence. But I didn't move. Instead, I picked up a cloth and wiped the counter that didn't need wiping. When she finally turned back, Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "You're kind, Aiden," she said. "That's going to make life hard for you." She started to walk past me toward the door. Just as she did, her hand brushed mine again. Accidental, maybe, but she didn't pull away right away this time. The rain softened outside, but the air between us didn't. She hesitated at the door, then looked back once, as if she almost said something, as if I almost stopped her. The next time she came, it wasn't planned. I heard the door open near closing time, and there she was, rain on her shoulders again, though it hadn't rained all day. Her hair was damp, her eyes tired in that way that comes from trying too hard to stay composed. "Mara," I said, "everything okay?" She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, looking at the empty shop as if it might give her something solid to hold on to. Then she exhaled, the kind of breath that sounds more like surrender than relief. "Do you ever feel like you're standing in the wrong version of your life?" she asked. I wiped my hands on a rag, unsure how to answer. "Sometimes." "What?" "Because lately, everything feels like a rerun," she said, walking toward me. "Same faces, same conversations, same quiet." Her voice cracked on that last word, barely noticeable, but enough to make me set the wrench down. "You don't seem like someone who lets life repeat itself." She laughed, dry and small. "You'd be surprised what people can live with." For a while, we just stood there. The sound of the rain gutter dripping outside filled the room, slow and uneven. She leaned against the counter, and I leaned beside her, both of us pretending we were looking at the same thing. "Why do you keep coming back?" I asked. She glanced at me sharply, then softened. "Maybe I like the noise of the tools. The smell of metal. Reminds me things can still be fixed. That's not the real reason." She looked down. "No," she whispered. "It's not." Silence again, thick, unkind, full of everything neither of us wanted to name. "Mara," I said, my voice lower than I meant. "This, whatever this is, people are going to start noticing." "I know. So why are you still here?" She finally turned toward me, eyes dark, wet at the corners. "Because I don't know where else I feel seen." That word hung there, heavier than any confession. Seen. Her gaze didn't move. I could feel her trying not to cry, and I could feel myself trying not to reach for her. "This isn't fair to you," she said after a while. "You don't know what it's like to lose years you can't get back." "I don't," I said quietly. "But I know what it's like to want something you shouldn't." Her lips parted, but no words came. The air between us tightened, small movements suddenly monumental, her hand brushing the counter, my breath catching at the sound of her sigh. We stood like that for what felt like minutes, maybe hours, close enough to feel the heat between us, far enough to know touching would ruin something neither of us could name. "Finally," she said, "you should stop looking at me like that." "I don't know how." She looked down, pressing her fingers to her temples as if steadying herself. "Then we're already in trouble." And just before she left, she turned, her voice barely a whisper, fragile, almost trembling. "I wish I'd met you when it could have been allowed." It was a slow day, the kind that drags like an unfinished sentence. The sky outside was pale, the air heavy with that static feeling before rain. Mara hadn't been by in over a week, and I told myself it was for the best. I almost believed it, until her car rolled up just before closing. She stepped out with something in her hands. A small cardboard box, taped twice over, like she wasn't sure she wanted it opened. "I need your help," she said simply. Her tone was steady, but her eyes weren't. I nodded, wordless, and cleared a spot on the counter. She set the box down carefully, then folded her arms like she was bracing herself. "It's just old things," she said, half smiling. "Stuff I should have thrown out years ago." Inside were photos, yellowed edges, faded smiles. A man I didn't know. A woman who looked like Mara, younger, brighter. A wedding ring catching sunlight. And tucked between them, a cassette tape. "Didn't know people still kept those," I said. "Didn't know people still looked at me like that," she replied. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Then she looked down, embarrassed. "Sorry. It's been a strange week." I picked up the tape. On the label, faint handwriting, for M. "Was he your husband?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "He died 11 years ago. Car accident. He used to leave me these recordings, little notes, songs, Nonsense. I kept meaning to get rid of them, but she trailed off. You didn't? No. Her voice wavered then, and she sat on the stool near the wall, pressing her hands together. He was a lot like you know. Thoughtful. Always asking questions no one else bothered to. I didn't know how to answer that. My throat felt too tight. I think that's why this, she gestured between us, vague, fragile, feels wrong. You remind me of someone I lost before I learned how to stop losing things. Her honesty hit harder than any confession could have, not because of what she said, but because she didn't cry when she said it. I stood there, unsure what to do with my hands, my heartbeat uneven. Maybe it's not wrong, I said finally. Maybe it's just misplaced. She gave a quiet laugh, shaking her head. You make it sound poetic. It isn't. It's just sad. Silence again. The kind that draws you in instead of pushing you away. I picked up one of the photos, a younger Mara leaning against a car, smiling at the camera like she trusted the world back then. You look happy here. I was, she said, and I didn't even know it. She reached for the photo, but instead of taking it, her fingers brushed mine, resting there for a moment too long. Her hand trembled slightly, and she didn't pull away this time. I shouldn't have come, she whispered, but I didn't know where else to take him. It took me a second to understand. The box, the photos, the tape. She wasn't dropping them off. She was letting them go. I didn't say anything. I just stood beside her, close enough that she could lean if she needed to. She didn't. But she didn't move away, either. And in that small, shaking silence, something shifted, not between us, but inside her. For the first time, she looked lighter. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't supposed to be the one saving her. It happened without ceremony. No grand confession, no sweeping gesture. Just a quiet evening, long after the shop lights had gone dim. Mara was sitting on the floor beside the counter, the empty cardboard box next to her, its tape peeled back and discarded. She'd spent the last hour sorting through what she wanted to keep. It turned out to be nothing. I thought it would hurt more, she said, her voice low. Letting go. I was sitting across from her, legs stretched out, the space between us cluttered with photographs and dust. Maybe that's how you know you're ready. She looked at me, really looked. You talk like someone twice your age. Maybe I've been listening to the wrong people, I said, and that made her smile, soft and tired. There was no music, no rain tonight. Just the sound of a car passing outside, then quiet again. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. I keep wondering, she said after a while, if I came here to remember him or to forget him. Maybe both, I said. Her eyes glistened in the low light. And where does that leave you? I swallowed. Somewhere in between. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked, a wrench shifted on the counter, and I could hear the faint tremor in her breathing. She looked down at one of the photos, a younger version of herself, and traced the outline of her own face with her thumb. He was a good man, she said, but I don't think I've been living since he left. Just waiting for something to pull me forward again. Maybe you just needed to remember what it feels like to be seen, I said quietly. She blinked, and her lips parted slightly, like she was about to protest, but she didn't. Instead, she reached for my hand. The touch was hesitant at first, then certain. Her palm was warm, faintly trembling. I didn't squeeze back right away. I just let her hold it, let her decide when to let go. Does this scare you? She asked after a long pause. Yes, I said, but it feels honest. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on our joined hands. I thought honesty stopped feeling good a long time ago. We sat there like that, two people surrounded by pieces of a life that didn't fit anymore, sharing the small, quiet realization that something had already changed. Not love, not yet, but something close enough to make pretending impossible. When she finally leaned forward, it wasn't a kiss. It was a gentle press of her forehead against mine, brief and trembling. The kind of gesture that feels older than words. I don't know where this goes, she whispered. Neither do I said. But I'm not afraid of it. She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. Then maybe, she said softly, that's the start. We stayed like that until the shop went silent again, the night folding around us. No promises, no plans, just the quiet collapse into something we both knew we couldn't undo. It's been months since that night in the shop. Sometimes, when the air smells faintly of oil and rain, I still think of it. The way she leaned her forehead against mine, the silence between us steady as breathing. Nothing dramatic followed. No running away together, no whispered promises. Just a quiet understanding that we'd reached a line neither of us wanted to erase, even if we couldn't cross it again. She stopped coming by after that. Not abruptly, just less often. A week would pass, then two. When she did appear, the air was different. Lighter. She'd smile more, and there was something new behind it. Something like peace. We didn't talk about what happened, not once. We didn't need to. That night had already done its work. I think about her sometimes while I close up the shop. How she used to stand by the window, tracing invisible lines across the glass. How her laugh, quiet and rare, made the whole place sound alive. How she taught me something no one else ever had. That connection doesn't have to be loud to change you. For a long time, I thought love meant arrival, getting somewhere, claiming something, being chosen. But with her, I learned it could also mean staying still. Letting a moment breathe until it teaches you what it's meant to. She once told me that I reminded her of someone she lost. I used to wonder if that meant I'd always be just a ghost of someone else's story. But now I think maybe we're all a little like that, filling in for what life took from someone before us, even for a short while. And maybe that's enough. The last time I saw her, she came to return the wrench she'd borrowed months ago. She left it on the counter, smiled, and said, "I finally fixed the shelf." I told her it suited her, the act of fixing things. She laughed, said, "Maybe now I can stop trying to fix myself." And for the first time, I believed her. I didn't ask for her number. She didn't offer it. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't undo what we'd already built in silence. When she walked out that final time, the sun was setting low behind her, painting the glass orange. I stood there until her car disappeared from view, and I realized something small but certain. She'd left, but not everything she gave me had. Now, whenever someone asks why I still work at this quiet little shop, I just shrug and say, it's where I learned to listen. Because that's what she gave me. Really, not love in the way people expect it, but attention, gentleness, the kind that teaches you what love could be if you stop trying to name it. And maybe that's what stays with me most. The unspoken things, the soft collisions, the way two lives can touch and then drift, still leaving warmth behind. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?